Okay, one last shot here at you, Sue. Jackson Street, the parking lot. Jackson Street, it's unsafe. You've heard numerous comments about traffic and people crossing into the Jackson Street parking lot. Congestion, no shade, no sitting, lack of restrooms. Main Street, more shade, more sitting, it's safer, more vendors, it makes the people happier. Doesn't this just make sense that you're actually going to do something that moves forward with progress?
What about the closures? I can.
What about what?
If I know,
No,
if
Sue,
I know.
what about enclosures?
Getting them off the street, switching it back to noon and having the people off the street by 1 instead of 1 and then off at 2:30 or 3.
We're gonna have a little discussion, I guess.
No,
okay.
these are issues. This is if I'm protecting the businesses downtown. That's where my bread and butters come from for 29 years. So if they have visibility, and if the people are if the vendors are off the street, and it's safer, great.
Let me say one last thing, and I'm going to go back to that last Saturday that I spent down there, and I spent an hour and 15 minutes going through every single business on both sides of the street and talking to the people that were working there. 99% of them were ecstatic with the floor traffic, with the coverage, with the exposure that they were getting. Were they all increasing in sales? No, not necessarily. But they were still pleased, and they were still happy to have the farmers market there because it was bringing more people into their business, if for no other reason, to look. One business in particular started out very negative. He said, this is not a good thing for my business, and now he's to the point where, you know what, maybe this is going to be okay. Why would you wait to do something that's right?
Okay, Tom?
So I'm very impressed with all the excitement for the move that people are showing. I guess I still have questions. One is, back in 2009 when we were considering doing this, we did a survey, we did a lot of checking, and it inspired us to make some improvements in the Jackson Street lot that are still in the lot. So putting the phone line in, putting power in, having a wastewater dump location, having those things on that side that we won't have on the other side. I'm concerned about lack of some of these facilities that we don't have on Main Street. Perhaps I'm wrong. Maybe they exist somewhere that, or maybe we can add them quickly. I'm also concerned that when we have the farmers market in the Jackson Street lot, we have a lot of activity there. We have a lot of activity in Friendship Square, and we still have activity. There's still people walking up and down Main Street. So it feels more spread out. It feels like there's more stuff going on downtown. When it's only on Main Street, we have Main Street and then we have Friendship Square, but it doesn't feel like we have anything going on in the Jackson Street lot. Now, we also had construction then, so I don't know. So I feel like it's a smaller footprint, but I could be wrong. I've only seen it. I only saw it one of those weekends, and it was a very brief visit. And maybe I'm just accustomed to the Jackson Street lot, so I can see how it works there. And maybe it's fine to move it, but I'm concerned about the lack of infrastructure and some of these things that we're not, we haven't consciously set ourselves up to be ready for these things.
Let's see.
So anyway, those are my questions. It's not that I'm.
Well,
I'm thinking, Les, did you have a comment about some of the infrastructure? Is that what I saw you raise an eyebrow? Please, go ahead.
If I may, thank you. Tom, you're correct. I mean, the Friendship Square site has been around a while. We identified some things. We took some actions to add some amenities, the dump site you're talking about, additional power, drinking fountain, things of that nature. Staff has already had some initial discussions about if the council chose to go this route, which possibly they will, and move to Main Street, how would we deal with that? Well, there is power on Main Street, and there's a fountain on Main Street already, but there are a couple things that we would be lacking: a dump site, and perhaps some extended power and other features. The phone line you mentioned. Those are things that I think we can deal with and we can overcome. We've already talked about a couple locations where a dump site could go. That would be reasonably close. And there's still things that Kathleen mentioned. We're still kind of massaging a little bit of where everybody goes. Do all the food vendors end up in one place? Do all the vegetable vendors end up in one? Do you mix them all together? There's some variety there. That will settle down, and then, assuming this happens, and then some of those amenities and infrastructure can be added, as we need to move on. So, it's not something that should be a roadblock. Those are things I think we can deal with. And there may be some other infrastructure issues that I think Tyler wants to talk about that we would also consider along the way.
Okay, thanks.
I'm just going to touch briefly on another question that Sue had brought up as far as the loading out of the vendors. That was a concern that, as my guys took down the traffic control each week, that some of the brick and mortar owners had expressed a concern with the length of time that it was taken. I think that some of that has to do with what Les alluded to as far as people getting used to where they were at, because each week it seemed that they were able to do it in less and less time as they started to figure out where they were. And we made a big emphasis, especially the last week that the market was there, that they needed to pack up and find more efficient ways. And two of the slower vendors actually were able to pull their stuff back into the parking area and up onto the sidewalk, and were able to get out of the roadway, so they were able to open the roadway and get things going. So I think a lot of that will be alleviated were it to happen if people had the opportunity to get used to it. In the Jackson Street, they had the same place. They knew how to load in, how to load out, and how it was more efficient to do. Some of those delays are just the inevitable delays associated with a new location and figuring out the logistics of it. And so I think that would probably diminish greatly as people got used to and the locations became more fixed.
Okay. And Ms. Greenfield from Bootsers suggested extending the market northward on Main Street. Well, at the same time as we heard some people really wanted to stay extended all the way to 6th Street. And how far will people walk, and what does it mean for those adjacent businesses? Is that an issue from ITD's perspective as regards 3rd Street? Encouraging people to cross. It's a four-way signalized intersection.
We're having people cross the state highway as it is on Jackson with the Jackson Street location. So really there wouldn't be any difference there other than they're crossing a narrower facility that's safer for pedestrian crossing on 3rd than on Jackson.
With the traffic intersection.
So
yeah, with a signalized light with countdown. So I mean, there would be some logistical things that would have to be looked at. But there are markets in the area. Coeur d'Alene comes to mind where there is a crossing of the street, and there are markets on both sides. So from a traffic control standpoint, it would be a very similar setup to what we have south of 3rd. And
because that was a request from one of our downtown merchants. Okay, other discussion, Sue?
I thought a good point was just brought up by Les, and this reminded me,
Tyler.
Kathleen, with no dogs in the market, there's no reason to keep all the food vendors separate from the other vendors anymore. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, I think a lot of my questions have been answered, and as long as the merchants can be protected, then I can go along.
So the question pertaining to dogs, though, last week, I presume the city attorney's chief of police, somebody authorized movement of people walking dogs on the east side of Main Street. Although
on the sidewalk.
On the sidewalk, but according to the council's will, that was clearly articulated, dogs are banned from the farmers market, which would, in theory, include both sides of Main Street and the square. Yeah? So does the council need to make a decision on that tonight, Randy, in terms of access by people walking dogs through Main Street?
I was just waiting to see what the decision of the council is, and then going from there about the details.
Okay.
The council adopted a policy, and councils can change policy. The way that we characterized it for the temporary purposes that the council directed us to bring about was that We just simply defined the market as what was west of the the east parking lot. The east sidewalk. Because they're not to be in the market, so that wasn't made part of the map of the market, and it didn't interfere with the policy. So when the council tells me what it wants to do, then I can react to that. I
Okay, so we do
haven't
have
heard a vote.
We have Walter's motion, we have Wayne's second. More discussion, Walter?
Not discussion, but just to speak to what Randy's saying. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but the council's intent with the prohibiting animals was, quote, in the market. There were some maps drawn to indicate where the market was and whatever, but the council didn't do that. When the market moved to Main Street, it started out with a question of, well, you can't ban dogs on Main Street because that's Main Street, it's not the market. The city attorney said, no, that is the market, and they're okay to ban them there. Then there was the problem with dogs buying packs, their owners buying packs for their dogs at Hyperspud. And I guess Randy or somebody looked at it and said, well, they're behind the market, they're on the east sidewalk, it's okay. And people liked it, and it seemed to work. So all of these little places where the new shoes rub, we're gradually breaking them in, we're working out the problems. As others have encouraged Kathleen to find ways to get clearly defined openings between booths or certain half blocks or whatever, so that the storefronts have more access. I would encourage her to find the right spot for people and settle them down quick, and just don't move them any more than we have to, as long as you get it right. And if we have to, we can set a time.
And do that in the next 10 minutes.
And if we have to, we can set a time that vendors will be off of the travelway of Main Street by X time. And they will just, by golly, have to make it work. And I think Tyler's right. A lot of it is, and I'm loading in the right side of my car, and I've always put this in the left side, and, it takes me longer to figure out how to put it, how to put it back in the rig. That's all.
We did hear from vendors, though, and they did say that the Main Street was better for offloading and loading up at the end of the day, because it was one direction. They were either on the west side of the street or they were on the east side of the street. And they weren't trying to configure going in and out of an alley and in and out of a parking lane and a parking lot. So we did hear that the directionals were easier on Main Street, because if you were on the west side of the street, you came in from the north. If you were on the east side of the street, you came in from the south. So a lot of this is details that need to be worked out. It was never intended that this was a permanent move, and so a lot of steps in the planning process were not put in place. If we were going to put this in place, we would have a vendor meeting with mapping, and Carrie Edwards, by the way, with engineering, has been really great with mapping, and we would have meetings with vendors and ask the vendors, what do you think? We tried a food court. It didn't work in that location. We moved back up onto Main Street. We tried walk-ons in the U.S. Bank parking lot. That didn't work out. We got a request from downtown businesses to go all the way down to 6th Street to try it out, which we did do, per business's request. That wasn't a vendor request. That was downtown businesses requesting. Now I'm hearing requests to take it over to First. So all of this is not worked out. It takes time to work this out.
And
but we got a pretty good taste of it.
Do we have ADA parking, disabled parking now?
We did add.
We tried that on the other side by U.S. Bank, and it didn't work. So
nope. So then we took some spots on the 4th Street roundabout behind the fountain and added more ADA. Then we added a couple extra
where the
ADA.
Police cars are?
In the roundabout where there's some parking. We added some ADA in there. We also added some additional ADA in the Jackson Street parking lot. Plus we gained all our ADA back by not having the market in the Jackson Street lot. Okay. So we actually increased our level of ADA parking by being on Main Street.
Okay.
So that's an equation, and we can do the math, and
Okay,
figure that out.
Walter?
One final, a clarification on my motion. I did not make it to move it to Main Street this coming Saturday. I didn't want to put staff in that position. But the intent of the motion is to move it to Main Street as quick as they can figure out how to make it work. Not to move it to Main Street next season, next month, next year, move it to Main Street. But I didn't want to say, make it happen Saturday, because I didn't want to put them under that pressure.
Wayne, that's your understanding as well, as a seconder?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And by the way, I'd like to welcome everybody to Tuesday morning.
Further discussion before voting?
And who's buying donuts?
Okay, hearing none, we're going to, Tom, did you have?
I just was going to say that I came tonight pretty well deciding that I thought we should just take more time and wait, but I feel more comfortable now
Okay.
with that
Yep.
decision.
Looks like Randy has a comment.
Just a channel for Gary. I hear you say that not this Saturday, but I also hear you say soon. I also heard sooner than October, sooner than next season. Did you want to give just a little bit more direction, or do you want us to bring it back as
I
a
would be
report as
happy
soon as
to.
we can? Or
I would be happy to.
okay.
Question for Kathleen. When can you move the market to Main Street?
Well, with the help of vendors and some downtown businesses and our staff, I think 2 weeks would be a pretty good time frame.
About like a week from this Saturday?
No.
Is that what you mean by 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Yeah,
August 4th or July 28th? August 4th or the
yeah,
11th?
the 4th.
Okay,
I'm looking at Randy.
I would like to change my motion, Madam Mayor, to make it as of August 4.
Okay, Wayne?
That's acceptable.
Okay, other discussion? Okay, hearing none, we'll start the roll call vote with you, Walter.
Aye.
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 I
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, market's moving August 4.